everybody, and welcome to another episode of React Roundup. This week on our panel we have Lucas Heiss.
Hello, everybody.
Nader Dabbit.
Hello, everyone.
And Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv. This week we have a special guest, and that's Kay Plößer.
Greetings.
Hey folks, I just want to let you know quickly about Netlify. Netlify is a really cool system for hosting what are traditionally known as static sites. However, the real benefit that I've been finding is that I don't have to mess with a back end. I can just set things up. I build the website out. I've been using a system called 11DJS, and you just deploy it. And then anything that you have that you want to do, you can do on the front end. So if you want to pull in some kind of database with Firebase or something else, if you want to collect form data, Netlify provides all kinds of services that make it easy to do all that stuff. If you're trying to do serverless, they have a really, really neat serverless setup that will allow you to deploy your websites without having to deploy a back end, and it'll do some of the work for you. I just love it. So if you're looking for a way that you can actually deploy a website that only has front-end technology in it, gives you all the tools that you typically need for the back end without having to actually program the back end, then give them a try. Go check them out at netlify.com.
Do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, I'm a software developer from Germany. I wrote a book about React, and at the moment I'm mostly doing React Native development.
What's your book?
React from Zero. I wrote it with Fullstack.io. Yeah, it's about learning React with the JavaScript you already know. It starts with objects and functions and teaches you how everything works without JSX and stuff. So, and without ES 2015. So you can use the JavaScript you know from 5 years ago or something to get into React, and then it builds up with JSX and how components works and such things.
Nice. I like it. I'm one of the lazy sorts that it's like, oh yeah, I don't have to learn 10 new things to learn this thing. That's awesome.
Yeah, I had the impression that most people were put off from React because, yeah, they were, when React grew big, we had this ES 2015 and React brought its own syntax and the JavaScript got updates that had new syntax, and the people were like, where should I start? Yeah, and I tried to break it down, remove as many tools as possible, and let the people start from zero. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. It's interesting because other communities have done this too. I mean, Angular has fully embraced TypeScript, for example. So, you have some of the same issues there. So I'm curious, Lucas and Nader, what's been your experience teaching and learning React? How did you guys pick up React in the first place? I don't know if we talked about that in a previous episode.
You want to start, Nader?
Yeah, sure. So I started with React Native, actually, and I started with React Native around a couple of weeks after it was released. I'd never touched really React before that. I think I'd seen a couple of conference talks about it. We started using it in my company because we were looking to build a mobile application with a bunch of JavaScript developers. And we were using Cordova and Ionic. We wanted to try something different. So I learned React Native first, and then subsequently learned React. And I've actually done teaching and training for React Native for the previous year, like 2017, pretty much that entire year. I ran React Native training where we taught React Native 80% of the time and React around 20% of the time. So I've had quite a bit of experience teaching it. I would say, like, in general, though, most of my experience has been teaching native developers how to build mobile apps using React Native and JavaScript.
Gotcha.
That's interesting. Yeah. So learning React was really weird because of like those factors you're saying. Like JavaScript was changing a lot by the time it was happening, and then it's like new syntax, which is a little bit like HTML, but it's not HTML. So that little bit was like burning me a lot in the beginning. And then when classes got into the picture, that was the time that I started like working with it. Then it was like we were learning to be to get like really far of the this keyword, and then there was like this everywhere. The beginning of learning React was really bumpy. So I did not do like any of those how would you say, those tutorials in the beginning that are similar to your book, Kay, that like, wait, so how does it work like underneath the cover, right? Like how it's how is JSX transpiled and things like that. After I started looking at that, is that I fully understood what was happening. And today I see that whenever people have a problem understanding something React, we need to go back to that. Like, and people say, now I understand it. So a lot of times it's like, oh, why is it like triggering re-render every time? And then I say, oh, every time you create like an element in JSX, it's creating a new object and blah, blah, blah. So these are the things that I believe that people still have problems with. And sometimes you just need to do the way your book does, Kay.
Yeah. The tooling and the compile step. And I started like this too. I got into a project and someone said, oh, we are using React here, have fun. And I didn't know anything about React. I was an Ember user before. And it was like, okay, this works like that. I have no idea, but well, I got it running somehow. And one evening when I couldn't sleep, I started writing a tutorial about the stuff that bothered me. And I thought people should know about. And that was 2016 or something. I wrote this tutorial and people picked it up and were like, oh, this is so good. I never thought about teaching this like this, like from the code and not from the tooling, like with Create React app. And you start with the tooling and it does the magic behind your back, and then something doesn't work and you are like, well, okay, what now? Yeah, let's go to Stack Overflow or something. Maybe they can help.
I remember back in the day, like, oh, let's start a new React project. And it was like 1 week doing Webpack stuff and setting up the transpilations. There was like Google Tracer. There was so many different like tools, and we were using Gope at the time. So I think that this new Create React app and Next.js, these new tools like helped so much. Like I remember the nightmare of needing to set up everything. So yes, beginning of React is complicated.
So that being said, where do you start then? Say somebody's trying to get in today, where do you start with it? I mean, do you just pull in React libraries and off you go, or is it not that simple? Or do you pull in Create React app? I don't know. Yeah,
Create React app seems to have abstracted away a lot of the mess that we used to have to deal with at the very beginning. In two different ways you could start. I would say typically would be either using Code Sandbox, which is a really nice editor that just starts you off with some code and you can start updating text and stuff like that without really having to worry about everything that's going on under the hood. And then Create React app, all you have to do is open app.js. You don't really have to worry about what else is going on there at first. Just kind of starting there allows you to kind of get up and running with the real world project. So both of those to me are pretty good places to start as far as like looking at real code. And then as far as learning, that there are just so many resources now, it's hard to even say where to go because there are just a lot of really good resources online.
Yeah, my idea with writing React from zero was the same problem I had. I started with a project that was already there. Someone wrote half a year on a project and then I got to it and I had to understand what was happening in these files. I didn't have to work with tooling. I didn't have to set up any build process or something. This was already done. This was like, I don't know. It was still before the Create React app tooling was out there, but that there was already a developer who has put in the week to set this stuff up, and I didn't have to do it. But I had to start writing my own components, and I have to start pull data from the server and things. And I was like, hey, this is JSX. What is this? What is happening here? And that was my idea with React from zero, that people can they start a project, they see, oh, I have to write components now. How do I do this? Yeah, and they read this book, and it's not very big. It's like with quizzes and screenshots and everything. It's like 200 pages. Yeah, so it's really short. And the second half is about advanced concepts, and the first half is about the absolute basics. So you can use this book, you can read it, and you know how to write, you know how to start, you know how to create your first file, to build your components, and to see something on the screen, or to modify components of other people without being overwhelmed by everything. And I already got a few replies from people who bought the book, who said, yeah, this landed them a job. They read this book and they were like, yeah, could start right away. They could go through the interview. They saw, oh yeah, this returns that. So most of the people they had interviews with didn't even know what was happening in the background. Yeah, they were using React from the got thing set up, and then someone came to the book and they have these attributes and all the things, and this worked for the people, and they didn't have to use any tooling, because the most projects were already set up, and most of the jobs out there were already existing projects of older React apps.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's most people first contact with React is like just get thrown in a project, and people say like, do something, fix this bug, or create these tests, or I don't know, like anything, and then you're just thrown into a React project. This is like the issue with like any languages and stuff like that. So how do you deal with the fact, and this is like, how do you deal with the fact that most of the code you're going to see is not really good code? So that's the thing, right? So this book helps like with, because like I'm writing a new component, a React component. Most of the code I'm seeing is not good because of reasons, because that's how software works. We don't have time or knowledge to do everything perfect all the time. So speak of best practice and things like that, do you think the book helps with that?
I don't know. I hope it does, especially in the advanced section. I did stuff like refactoring, or when you go from an element, an input element, and now you want to use your own component or such things, or when you have to integrate a third-party library like Leaflet or D3 or something. Yeah? I try to help with this, but I've seen projects, where you can't anticipate everything. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, I've seen this chapter on integrating with D3. Like this is a big problem that I've had like in the past. It's like we use these libraries for, I don't know, like the calendars and date pickers and this graph library, and now we have this new React world, and then we start getting really mad that we are not back in the jQuery world where everything worked. And so it's really good to see a chapter on that.
Yeah, I had to integrate multiple libraries in my first React project. I started and I had this React project, and people were like, "Oh, we need maps and we need some animations on the maps, and we need some WebSockets and whatever." And I was like, "Where do I start with this?" Yeah, I had the feeling in this time, it was like 2014. There weren't best practices. It was like, oh, everyone made his own wrapper library for whatever, yeah. And you were like, oh, I use React D3 or I use React Leaflet or whatever, and they tried to somehow force the React way on these libraries, and it didn't always work perfectly. You had this layer in between, and you didn't know what was going wrong. And so one day I started to remove these libraries and were like, so I will use lifecycle methods for this. I will give them their reference, their ref. I will put it, we'll render an empty div and take a ref, and we'll give it to the third party library, and it can do its thing. And if someone comes who knows about this library, he knows, okay, this is a ref, this is some DOM element, and I can use my D3 stuff to work with this, and I don't have to learn all the indirections, the how to render all these elements or something. And yeah, this was my best practice, what I learned from the project. Yeah, I try to remove as much moving parts as possible, but I don't know if there are better ways now, if there are better React integration libraries where you can just put your JSX together and get a map and it works like expected, because back in the days it didn't.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how best practices have evolved over the last couple of years. And at the very beginning, like what best practices were there that are different than they are now, and how those best practices are kind of evolved by certain people in the community. Either a best practice is evolved over actual like real reasons, or sometimes someone in the community will just say something and people will start doing it. So it's kind of
I love those.
Yeah, it was like that.
I would say like the biggest example of that over the last couple of years, in my opinion, is the whole render props thing, where like no one was using render props, and then people started saying to use them, and everyone even changed their APIs to use them, and then now they're almost like been deprecated with the new hooks that came out. And also, like I always thought when I'm using these render props, most of my code starts looking really messy after 2 levels actually of nesting those, because you start getting really gross looking code. And I was always thinking I was like the crazy one because no one was agreeing with me.
Yeah. With the question with render props is that like it's already ugly with one.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
You had like 2 indentations, and then the fact that they do not compose. It's like we're back to callback hell all over again. Yeah. So like it seems one friend was saying like, I think that the success of render props is only because it's so easier to type with TypeScript. Because the higher order components are very difficult to get the typing right. So maybe people are like, oh my God, this is so good. But yeah, that happens. Like things come and go.
Yeah, that's a good point. You're saying like much easier than higher order components
to write a type.
Yeah, exactly.
But like to use, I believe that it's very difficult to beat a higher order component. They just put the function there. The thing is in your props. You can use in your life cycles. Everybody's happy.
Yeah, I had the feeling people were like using, trying to remove different concepts, and by this they made it more complicated than it needed to be. Hooks extend in another dimension than render props do. Render props, it's like you have your components and you can stack them together, and if you need something extra, you put it in. And your tree grows and it grows and it grows. And we all saw the screenshots of people who had like 20 render props nested into each other. And it was like crazy, yeah. And the hooks are a way to move in another direction. You can still do this this nesting, yeah, but you don't do it in your component tree anymore, yeah, which clears up the whole thing quite a bit.
Speaking on hooks, Kay, you have a really good blog post that you published, React Hooks Demystified. It got very big, right?
The blog post?
Yes. Like I read it.
Yeah. Some people asked me to cross post it, and I even got invited to this podcast because of it, and it didn't get as big as the book stuff, but I was one of the first people who tried to write my own hooks implementation, something experimental, to show the concept for people. Yeah, it's like you import your stuff from React, and then you write your first components and you put in the hooks function calls, and it's like magic. Yeah. You don't know what's happening. It's like Well, I called a few functions, but how do they work? Where do they get their data from? And what is happening here? I mean, people know their components are run inside the React class or the React library. It seems like magic, yeah. And so I tried to look into it and to figure out what's the basic JavaScript that does all these things, like I did with React from zero. Yeah, people know JavaScript, but they don't know what's happening here. Yeah, it's like, okay, it's cool, it's much less code than before, and it works, but why? Yeah, and I think it's a nice concept. It's a really nice concept because it uses a property of JavaScript that is known by every one of us, but we not all of us would use it in that way. Yeah, it's like if you save something in a global and you call a synchronous function and you read it from that global again, only this function can do anything, because only synchronous code could do anything, because JavaScript is single-threaded and nothing can happen in the background if the call isn't asynchronous. This makes sense again because React calls your function to get your rendering, and it knows all the globals before it calls your function, and it knows all the globals after your function returns. So if your function writes anything in globals, instead of returning something or in addition to returning something, you can read it like normal data you would return. But it isn't. It's a side effect. It's happening in the background, and you don't see it because you use hooks stuff and you use state also or something, and then it writes something in a global, and then you return, and React knows, this is the global I need to look at, and here's the data, and now I can do something. And when it comes back the next time you render something, it knows, last time they saved something in this, and we read it from there, and then we can put it back there before we call the function, and the function finds everything as it expects it. It's a nice idea. It's a bit magic when you're not used to it. It's like you always read globals are bad. Yeah, this is what you read everywhere. Globals are the devil, and if you use them, you're doing something wrong. And I'd say this is mostly true. Yeah, but sometimes if you really control the environment, and if you really know that it can't happen anything, people start some asynchronous calls there. You told them they can't do this, or it wouldn't work, and you are out of you don't have the problem anymore. So I think it's really nice, and it's really especially a simplification. There are problems, which you need to address when you teach the stuff. Yeah, you have to tell the people, or you can't put this in a for loop, or you can't put this in an if statement. You have to put your if statements inside the call of the hook and such things. But well, you couldn't do this with lifecycle methods anyway. Yeah, it isn't a step back. It's just your syntax or your language would allow to do it, which it wouldn't allow with lifecycle methods. But you don't lose anything when you switch to hooks. I think you win something, because now your stuff is compressed into one hook and isn't spread around your classes. Plus, teaching people classes is also a thing you have to do when you teach React. Yeah. And if everything would work with hooks, you wouldn't have to need to teach people classes, and classes have their own problems. Like you said, you have to work with this, and you don't have auto binding if you use ES 2015, and then you are like, where's my this again? And I have to do it manually, and all these things, and all the semantics that are a little bit different, and they go away. You don't have to teach people anything. We are. It's like a step backwards in the sense of we simplifying the whole thing, because we need a fewer concepts to express the same thing. Yeah.
The whole idea of teaching classes was that's such a huge point, because people coming into React may have never used a class if they've been writing JavaScript, right? So it's kind
Yes.
of like you're teaching them all this stuff at once, and then classes are so hard to get, a good explanation, especially within like a 1 to 3 day training or whatever, or even if they're learning something new. It's just so much to understand, and then trying to explain how this works is really tough. I've tried to do it, and I haven't found a good way to explain it to where everyone kind of gets it.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it seems that the use state, it seems that the use reducer and the use effects, it seems that they are more natural to the problem we're solving, but unlearn the life cycle.
Yeah.
The life cycles is very hard. So I still did not like teach React hooks to anyone starting, but in another episode of the podcast, we were comparing like this to maybe like for loops and filter map reduce. I've taught like filter map reduce to people starting, and it was like much easier to teach someone who's starting like what a filter or a map does than people who are used to for loops. Which is really crazy to think about. Like if you talk about a filter, it's like, okay, so you put a function, if it's true, the element is in. If it's false, the element is out. You're like filtering, you remove elements. Everybody's like, oh, okay. And people in for loops, it's like, wait, I have a for loop in my mind. Wait, what's it doing? Is it pushing to a new? And it's like, it's crazy. Like I feel that this is happening now with the hooks. A lot of people are trying to like compile in their minds, like, wait, what was the component did update way of doing things? Component did mount, component will, I don't know what. And now how do I translate this to use effect? But this is like, how do we avoid this kind of things? I don't know.
I think a big problem is that we went far away from this with classes and with render props and higher order components and such things, because it tried to put everything inside the rendering. It's you needed some data, then you would put your render prop in and it would throw out your data and then you could render. And I never did this. I wrote about this online. Yeah, I blogged about this and stuff, but I never, in my current projects, I went totally away from all these things. I would only use, at the top level, I would have a screen component, which is a class. This would have lifecycle methods, and everything from down there are just function components. And from this to get to hooks is really easy, because I have like, I don't know, 20 screens on my app, and then I have like 1 to 3 lifecycle methods on every of these classes, and now I would replace them with these hooks. And since, yeah, sure, there are some asynchronous calls which are a bit harder to get around with this, but yeah, I think use effect would solve all of my problems and even encapsulate some of this stuff that I have now in multiple screens implemented, and now I have the abstraction to just pull it out without needing to render anything extra, without needing to create some components that does this in background with the help of React's rendering mechanism.
So did we talk a little bit about your book and the process of writing that?
Okay. Yeah, so I created a tutorial in 2016. Yeah, I thought I did many things with React that people could be interested in, and I saw that I had the approach that I would remove all the tooling necessary so people could use it with their browser. Yeah, they could just fire up a browser, type some JSX or some code, and could use everything. And this was in 2016. Then people would ask me, I don't know about this, I don't know about that. Can you make a lesson about this? And I started writing lessons about this. And one day in this year, in 2018, Dan Abramov had seemingly problems with people who were like writing, it's so hard to get started with React because of all the tooling. And then I showed him my tutorial and said, I made a tutorial and it is without tooling. And he probably thought, well, this is exactly what I needed right now. And then he he started on GitHub, and people were like, oh, he started this tutorial, let's look at this. And people were like, yeah, people loved it, and everyone started. And then people were writing me, oh, this is such a good tutorial. I even got a few jobs with this tutorial. I didn't know any JavaScript, any React before I read this tutorial. I just know some basics and jQuery, and this was enough to get started and write my first components. And this is what I basically did in the first project where I started as a junior developer or something. And yeah, one day Nate from Fullstack.io wrote me and asked, hey, I saw your tutorial. I had people to write books about technical things. We already wrote a book about React, a rather big book with many pages, about 800 pages or something, and called Full Stack React, and they would cover everything. Yeah, but it was more a broad approach. They wouldn't go into the details. They would go everything like, this is how you connect the back end, and this is how you do this, and this is how you do that. And my approach was more like, I will into the concepts of React and try to get them down. And then I started to write the book in July this year. And since I already had all the lessons down, I just had to make chapters from the book for the book from them. Yeah, I didn't have to invent new content. I already had all the content. I have to change the format, because if you write a tutorial on GitHub, it's different than when you write a book, and people pay for the book and don't pay for the GitHub repository. Right. So they expect some more hand-holding. Yeah, they expect that you go to it, and you not only have code examples, but you tell the people, in this, first we do this, then we do that, then we do that, and you have to look for this, and this could be a problem. Yeah, and people who couldn't understand it when reading the tutorial would buy the book and probably understand it after reading the book, because it's more detailed in text, and it's like the repository with more comments. And yeah, then I started to create an video course for this, which I didn't finish at the moment. I'm half through it, but yeah, this is what I will release in the next few weeks. That people who wouldn't understand it when I tell them, and when they saw the code, or people who want to see me write it down letter by letter, so they understand it. Yeah, and this is what I did the last 3 months. Writing tutorials, books, and recording videos.
So when you wrote your book, did you self-publish or did you go through a publisher?
I published via Fullstack.io, which is a small publisher from, I think...
they got started with NG Book, which was for Angular. Yeah. And yeah, then they've kind of branched out. So I think they have a Vue book. Yeah. And yeah, it sounds like you wrote the React book.
No, they have a React book, a really big React book that's called Full Stack React.
Oh,
like I said, 6 people wrote it, and it's like 800 pages or something. It really covers everything about React. And my book is like 200 pages, and it's like, it's cheaper, and but it's also more focused on getting basic React stuff done. Yeah, so it's like they accomplish each other. One is like you start with React from zero, and they tell you if you need more information about API involvement and stuff, you would buy and read Full Stack React.
So how was the process of writing a book through them? Is it are they like very hands-on, or do you just kind of submit the finished copy and then they review it and that's it?
It was really nice to write with Nate, because he had me edit the book. I would write a chapter, then I would show it to him. We would write it with Markdown, and he would say, well, I would go there differently, or he would fix my spelling issues, because I'm not a native speaker and I was never really good in English at school. Yeah, I started getting better in English when I started working and had to read many online technology blogs and talk with people from the US, because they were the only ones who could help me. And yeah, this was a really, really nice approach to see where my problems were with the stuff I didn't know. Like I think I knew it and I wrote it down, and he was like, you can't start from the complex example and go to the simple one. And I was like, yeah, sounds reasonable. My idea was first I show everything that's possible, and then I show a simple example that just the needed stuff, but the other way makes more sense, yes, especially when writing a book. And then we would write it. I would write it, and he would edit it, and he would make suggestions, and I would see, it's probably better if I split this up or merge these two lessons into one chapter. Or when I was writing about all the details, I saw, okay, now I did this and that and that, but how did I end up like this? Like I saw holes in my knowledge. It was like I knew it, I could program it, and it would work, but when I explained it, I knew, I didn't know how this works, or I didn't know how this works, because it wasn't knowledge you needed to program. It was knowledge that was hidden, like with hooks. Yeah, something is happening in the background, and you just write your functions, and everything works, and you are like, I understand this now. Yeah, I got the concept, but then you try to explain someone. Yeah, this is like hooks. You just call this function, then you get your state, and next time your states change, you call the function again, and they are like, yeah, but where do I get my data from? Yeah, it's like I just call a function. This function does have to read the data from somewhere. Yeah? And then I realized I didn't know all the details that were needed to explain the stuff. And yeah, Nate really helped me to structure this whole process, to structure the process of teaching all these things.
So have you been able to supplement some of your income from doing these sorts of things, like books and stuff?
Pretty much. I guess I made enough money to pay my rent for 1 year with this book, which isn't that bad, I guess.
Very cool, yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm always thinking about that, like ways that you can decentralize your income, so you can have more. It's like it's freedom, right?
Yeah, it's really nice. You write your book. You do it when you think you are in the mood to do it. Well, I think you need to do it. You can't just say I'm never in the mood and one day it will be finished, because someone has to write it and other people won't do the work for you. It's lower income. Yeah, it's not like it's my first book. I'm not really good at writing. I learned so much when I wrote this book, but I was never. Yeah, I never expected me to be an author. Yeah, I never expected me the person who barely got through university or through high school to start with to write a book. Yeah, I was never the language guy. Diversify the income is important, because you are less bound to your projects. I mean, I'm a freelancer. I do projects with React Native mostly, and people are paying good money for this. Yeah, it's really, everyone wants an application for Android and for iOS. They can put into one of these application stores, and this pays good money, but it also binds you. You have like 3 to 6 months, and projects have problems, and some things get delayed, and then you sit there and wait for your money because you can't work and write your invoices and stuff. And with the book, you don't make that much money. When you start it, people pay for it. When it comes out, they pay much money. And when then stuff is like Black Friday, you get extra money. But most of the time, it's like if it's okay, you make like, I don't know, a few bucks a week. Yeah. But it's continuous. It's like, it's not like, so you finished your book, you get your big money, and then it's done. It's more like, there's a bit money and there's a bit money. And with online video courses too, people buy these courses, and then you get there a bit of money and there. And I think if you made a few of these, it could be enough to pay your fixed costs with this. Yes. And if you're really good, you probably don't need that much courses to pay your rent. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. And in the end of the day, like you're helping people. So
yeah,
it's like
I don't think I make big money with how to get rich quick. Yeah, it's not like this. Yeah, this is funny, but this is what you read most. You get some people who want to sell you books on Facebook or something. Yeah, so how I made my first million, or how I made my first 10,000 euro or something. And what I say is, well, this book, it costs you like $30, and if you work 1 hour of React as a freelancer somewhere, you paid for this book. Yeah, it's not a job that is. It's many projects out there with React and React Native, and they pay more than like $30 an hour, and you can get your money back. You probably won't make your first million when you read this book. Yeah, but you probably can make enough money after you read this book to pay your rent for a few months. Yeah, and I think this is good enough for a start.
Yeah, I think people get the idea that authors are rich or famous or something, and I find, especially now that I'm writing books and talking to authors, that that's not necessarily the case.
No, I'm not rich. I don't think I'm poor. Yeah, I'm an engineer and a freelancer. I get paid good money for what I do, but I have to work for my money. Yeah, if I stop working for my money, it will go away, and I don't have so much money that I never have to work again. I can't retire tomorrow. Yeah, if I stopped working, I probably would went out of cash in about a year or something.
Yeah, I find that most people, when they write a book, at least their first book, sometimes they have the idea that they're going to make a bunch of money, but I think most people who wind up writing a book and going through all of the effort, they'll wind up talking to enough people to realize that the game in authorship is more about getting your name out there or getting your message out there than it is about money.
Yeah. And it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Right. I talked to some people who wrote books, and they were like, my life was over for 3 years, like for 2 years. Even when the book gives you a lot of money, if you think about the time that you put in the book, right? It's a lot.
Yeah. The funny thing is, after I wrote this book, some people contacted me on Twitter and said like, hey, yeah, you are like a micro-influencer or something. Can't you review our books? And I started reviewing books of other people. And when I read them, I wouldn't say I'm a good author, but when I read them, I really had the impression these people were just writing books to write books, and they probably don't even sell much. They just want to be the guy who wrote a book about this topic, and he can say, I wrote like 10 books in the last 3 years, and I'm a pretty accomplished author in the industry and something. Yeah, writing my first book gave me a bit of a feeling what is important, and that you have to have a direction when you try to teach people and have a goal you want to accomplish. And I have the feeling most books are rather broad in their goal. They are like, you read it and you have the feeling, okay, I don't know, maybe I could have read the documentation and this would be okay. I don't know.
Yep. We should probably plug one of the other authors on this show. Natter, you wrote React Native in Action for Manning, right?
Yeah, I did. And I went through a publisher that is more of like a traditional publisher, I guess. And like you, I haven't made that much money off of it, but I've gotten a lot of other perks. Like you mentioned, people come to you for consulting maybe or for other stuff because you're known as like an industry expert at that point. So like the more content creation that I do, the more I see that type of response and stuff like that. I've actually made more money off of creating videos online than I have of writing books. So I'm kind of focusing in 2019 to hopefully start doing more video production on websites like Udemy and stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nice.
Cool. Well, anything else we want to dive into before we hit picks?
I made a video about React Native on Skillshare on 2000, I don't know, somewhere last year or something. It's rather old, and it still pays like $5 a month or something. I think videos pay much more money, but they are also heavier to produce. You can't just sit down and write your stuff and then you have a book and it's done, but you have to get the whole production process up and running. And if you are not a native speaker, it's even harder to articulate yourself, and people have to understand what you're saying. But yeah, I think I will do this in the next year too. Maybe writing another book, maybe doing more videos about things. I started to get into AWS this year and read much stuff from Nada about Amplify and things, and I thought about maybe I could write something about this topic, like, I don't know, MVPs with AWS or something.
That would be cool. That would be awesome. I'd love to help you out if you did that. There isn't a lot of content out there yet. That would be a good place to be.
This would be awesome, because I think the unique selling point of this whole serverless stuff is we are closer to the customers, and we can do stuff much faster. But all the things I read online are still about the technology and not about developing speed or how we implement this or that. We have this use case and want to go there and things. And I thought this could be an interesting project for next year to get something like this out.
This episode is sponsored by Sentry.io. Recently, I came across a great tool for tracking and monitoring problems in my apps. Then I asked them if they wanted to sponsor the show and allow me to share my experience with you. Sentry provides a terrific interface for keeping track of what's going on with my app. It also tracks releases so I can tell if what I deployed makes things better or worse. They give you full stack traces and as much information as possible about the situation when the error occurred to help you track down the errors. Plus, one thing I love, you can customize the context provided by Sentry. So, if you're looking for specific information about the request, you can provide it. It automatically scrubs passwords and secure information, and you can customize the scrubbing as well. Finally, it has a user feedback system built in that you can use to get information from your users. Oh, and I also love that they support open source to the point where they actually open sourced Sentry if you want to self-host it. Use the code DevChat at Sentry.io to get 2 months free on Sentry's small plan. That's code DevChat at Sentry.io. All right, well, let's go ahead and do some picks. Nader, do you want to start us with picks?
Sure. So I started a new book this week called Finite and Infinite Games, and it's kind of a very light read on game theory, and I'm enjoying it a lot.
Interesting. Lucas, what are your picks?
All right, I have 2 picks today. One is an article I read yesterday on CSS Tricks. It's called Introduction and Guide to the CSS Object Model. We usually know a lot about the DOM, the Document Object Model, and this is a blog post explaining like how to manipulate and read CSS with JavaScript, like the APIs that the browser has. I had no idea we could do that much, and it's just like interesting to understand how these things work. And my next pick is a pick that, for programming nerds like us, you need to be careful not to waste hours on it. It's the AST Explorer. It's a website that you just like write code and look at the different compilers, how they build the different ASTs and stuff like that. And I just couldn't stop like writing JavaScript, Markdown, and seeing like how these things are, how the ASTs are built. It's super cool.
That's really cool. Yeah, I've played a little bit with it, and it's pretty cool, the AST Explorer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to shout out a quick pick here. To give a little bit of context, we did an episode on JavaScript Jabber. We recorded it a few weeks ago. I think it comes out a couple weeks from now as we record this episode. And we talked about the Jamstack. And if you're not familiar with the term, it's JavaScript APIs markup. So essentially, you can think of it as essentially using JavaScript or, frameworks or things like that to enhance a static page. There's a lot more to it, and you can go listen to the episode on JavaScript Jabber. But I started playing with a system called Eleventy, which is a static site generator written in JavaScript. And the more I played with it, the more I realized that this would save me a whole lot of trouble and maintenance on devchat.tv. And so I've been working on migrating the website
I had a couple of issues. One is that the last time I migrated the website, apparently not all of the show notes came over. And so I need some help getting the show notes updated. And I also need some people to tag the episodes. So what I'm offering, because I get a lot of requests for coaching, my coaching rate is $500 an hour, just because I'm busy and it's hard for me to prioritize at any less than that. But what I'm doing is if folks want to get some coaching, you can. What you have to do is either write show notes for 3 episodes. And so you have to go listen to the podcast episode. You have to write the show notes the way that we have them on the website for the most recent episodes, and then submit a pull request. And if you go to github.com/CMAXW, that's CMAXW, that's my handle. So github.com/CMAXW/devchat-11D, and I'll put a link in the show notes. And you submit that pull request with the 3 episodes show notes, or 5 episodes where you listen to the episode and then put tags in. Then if I accept the pull request, then I will do an hour of coaching with you. So you get $500 value of coaching, for however long it takes you to do that. Now, if you submit a pull request and somebody else submits a pull request for the same episode, I'm going to look to see who claimed it first. So what I would do is I would actually submit an issue on it's a public repo on GitHub. So submit an issue on the repo and just let people know, hey, I'm working on, React Roundup episode. React Roundups needs the tagging, but doesn't need the show notes. So, but yeah, you can say I'm doing tagging for episodes 1 through 5, right? And then that way I can give you priority over somebody else who submits them as well. So anyway, yeah, and then I'm probably going to work out some kind of bounty on like typos and dead links and things like that, but I'm still figuring that out. So anyway, if you're interested, I would really appreciate the help. I know this episode comes out, like I said, a few weeks out, and I'm emailing the mailing list. So go see what people have picked up, see what's left, and then, like I said, I really appreciate your help. Kay, what are your picks?
I got one pick. It's not that nerdy. It's some stuff I read in the last few weeks, months. It's called Wardley Maps, a book written by Simon Wardley. I think it's a nice read. It teaches management and strategy to people who always had the feeling this felt a bit magical, or they didn't really know what they are doing. And he defines the concept of mapping and how to map out your projects or your company or your products or whatever. And then you can see where the money flows, what is expensive, what not, what is experimental, what is proof of concept, or what is a commodity, or what is already a project, what do we need to buy, or what can we buy from, like, let's say, like computing power from Amazon or something, or what do we need to build ourselves, or I think it's a nice read, and it gives it's a big book and it's free, but yeah, it's a big book, and I think it gives a nice view on the whole strategy stuff that feels elusive to engineers sometimes.
Awesome. All right. And if people want to reach you online, where do they go?
Mostly on Twitter. I would say my Twitter handle, but it's I don't know it by heart, but I think it will end up in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll make sure it winds up in the show notes.
K4Y1S is my Twitter handle, I think. Yeah, or you can email me. I think my email address is simple too. It's k@kay.is. If people want to get in touch with me for anything like projects or teaching or writing books. So.
Oh my gosh, that's you on Twitter. I've followed you for a long time. That's
yeah, I followed you too.
The picture that you have, like, I have no idea who it is. So it's good to put a face to the Twitter profile.
Yeah.
See, it only took us an hour to figure out that you're internet famous. Okay. All right, folks. So we'll go ahead and wrap this one up. Thanks for coming, Kay.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And thanks to our panel. We will be back next week.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.